huge news in regards to Palestine Action, as the government's ban on the group has been ruled unlawful by the High Court. Huda Amori, co-founder of Palestine Action, won a legal challenge to Yvette Cooper's decision to ban the group. The prescription of Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation prompted huge condemnation across the country, which led to thousands of arrests for those who showed support, including those who were peacefully holding up signs. Since the 5th of July, punishment for showing support of being a member of Palestine Action could land you in prison for up to 14 years. That was an example of extreme state overreach, an unprecedented move to brand them as terrorists. On Friday, 3 judges led by the president of the King's Bench Division, Dame Victoria Sharp, ruled the decision to prescribe the group was unlawful, but the ban on the group would remain to give the government time to appeal. They allowed the challenge on 2 of 4 grounds, namely that there was a very significant interference with the rights to freedom of speech, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association, and that the then Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's decision to prescribe Palestine Action was not consistent with her own policy. Current Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has vowed to fight this decision. Taking to Twitter, she said, "The court acknowledged that Palestine Action has carried out acts of terrorism. It concluded that its actions are not consistent with democratic values and the rule of law. Supporting the Palestinian cause is not the same as supporting Palestine Action. The government's prescription followed a rigorous process endorsed by Parliament. I will fight this judgment in the courts of appeal." And attached is a statement which reads, "The court has acknowledged that Palestine Action has carried out acts of terrorism, celebrated those who have taken part in those acts, and promoted the use of violence. It has also concluded that Palestine Action is not an ordinary protest or civil disobedience group, and that its actions are not consistent with democratic values and the rule of law. For those reasons, I'm disappointed by the court's decision and disagree with the notion that banning this terrorist organisation is disproportionate. The prescription of Palestine Action followed a rigorous and evidence-based decision-making process endorsed by Parliament. The prescription does not prevent peaceful protests in support of the Palestinian cause," another point on which the court agrees. "As a former Lord Chancellor, I have the deepest respect for our judiciary. Home Secretaries must, however, retain the ability to take action to protect our national security and keep the public safe. I intend to fight this judgment in the courts of appeal." I think she might be one of the worst Home Secretaries we've ever had. It is absolutely disgraceful to go and attack the courts, the High Court, by the way, and say this is a bad decision. You can't simultaneously say, I respect the High Court, but also they're wrong. And by the way, the idea that there was rigorous procedure and evidence to show that Palestine Action are a threat to national security. I mean, we have known for a long, long time, at least a year, through various leaked documents, that Palestine Action posed no threat to national security. Even national security agencies said they were not a threat to national security. And the reason why Parliament voted to back it is, one, because Parliament is full of Zionists or Israel-backing people, but 2, the government sneakily added this onto the same bill as 2 other far-right domestic terrorist organisations. 2 organisations that were actually extreme. So, of course, MPs were either voting to allow far-right extremist organisations to continue freely, or they had to vote for Palestine Action to become a terrorist organisation too. It wasn't in a separate bill, and that is utterly, utterly shameless. Now, Mahmood has already faced a backlash from commentators on her announcements that she will appeal. Owen Jones tweeted this: "You have helped facilitate genocide. You have sought to throw grannies behind bars for opposing that genocide. You will lose. You will be remembered only as a monster, and one day it is politicians like you who will end up behind bars for facilitating the crime of crimes." I completely agree with Owen Jones, and I'm glad to see how angry he is, because I'm incredibly angry, despite the good news. Now, Novara Media's Aaron Bastani replied to the Home Secretary: "You'll be defined by this for the rest of your career, but in your defence, it's sad the idiocy of Yvette Cooper that led to this. It was never a tenable position." Right, he is, because, of course, Yvette Cooper was the one who initially facilitated this. By the way, she should go, and I think Shabana Mahmood should resign. But he's also right that she is going to be remembered for this for years to come. Labour MP John McDonnell criticised Mahmood's words. So we have a Home Secretary that is going to fight the judiciary now. This is hardly the language of someone holding one of the highest offices of state. You can disagree with court decisions, but you don't have to use the language usually reserved for the fringes of the right. Despite the High Court allowing for the ban to continue until the appeal, the Met Police announced they would not be enforcing it. The High Court has found that the decision to prescribe Palestine action was unlawful. However, the group remains prescribed pending the outcome of any government appeal, which means expressing support is still a criminal offence. We recognise these are unusual circumstances. From a Metropolitan Police perspective, officers will continue to identify offences where support for Palestine action is being expressed, but they will focus on gathering evidence of those offences and the people involved to provide opportunities for enforcement at a later date, rather than making arrests at the time. This is the most proportionate approach we can take, acknowledging the decision reached by the court while recognising that proceedings are not yet fully concluded. This approach relates solely to the expression of support for Palestine action. We will continue to intervene and make arrests where we see people crossing the line from lawful protest to intimidate, to damage property, to use violence, to stir up racial hatred, or to commit other offences. We are mindful that this decision comes at a time when the impact of a prolonged period of significant protest continues to be felt by communities across London, in particular Jewish communities. We will continue to take an assertive and determined approach to dealing with anti-Semitism and other hate crimes, acting decisively against anyone who tries to use the cover of protests to cause fear and distress to Londoners. Now, that last part of the statement was absolutely not necessary, trying to link this to anti-Semitism, trying to say, well, do you know what? We need to protect communities. This is about Israel and their genocide, but once again, the British institutions are conflating the two. Now, despite the Met releasing this statement, people should still be very cautious. Navarra's Harriet Williamson tweeted this. Met officers have told me that they're still being directed by command to advise sign holders that they could be risking arrest and prosecution. However, in an update, she said, Metropolitan Police Inspector confirms to Navarra Media that police are not expecting to make arrests for sign holding today, even though Palestine Action remains a prescribed organisation until a further hearing later in February. This is Lord Wolney's reaction to the decision on the BBC.
I'm trying to digest and must admit I find it rather perverse, the ruling, the judgment that relates to this idea that this will have a chilling effect on freedom of speech, because I think for most people it's really quite clear that you can say what you like in terms of a cause, and you can stand up for Palestinian rights or whatever, but you're not entitled to break the law.
Kevin, I want to get your reaction to the High Court ruling and your response to Wolney and Shabana Mahmood's vow to fight the verdict.
I think it's worth mentioning that Lord Wolney was a former chair of Labour Friends of Israel. A fact that I think is pertinent given his analysis of the situation there. Yes, this is obviously very good news. It gives you some amount of faith restoration in terms of the British justice system, that if you actually fight properly, you can succeed under the law. The fact that they were prescribed Palestine Action as a terrorist group was obviously government overreach from the very start. And let's just notice the elephant in the room. Zionism. Zionism is the root cause of all of this, okay? The British government's being in hock to Zionist influence is exactly the reason that they do all of these things. They're exactly the reason that they arrest grannies and 80-year-old pastors and disabled people for daring to hold a sign, is because they want to do the bidding of Israel. That's it. They are puppets of Zionism and nothing more at this stage. The police, although they have taken a much more mild approach to this, given the decision, have been an arm of that as well. Yvette Cooper should hang her head in shame, and unfortunately, I do have to disagree with oh, for God's sake, what's his name again? Owen Jones. Jesus Christ. I have to disagree with Owen Jones on one particular point, which is that unfortunately Shabana Mahmood and Yvette Cooper won't face jail time for this, because unfortunately we don't live in the world where we actually have a rule of law that applies to all people. These people will not face those consequences. One consequence that at least Shabana Mahmood will face, though, is that she will lose her seat at the next general election. So I will take a certain amount of small joy in that particular thing. But yes, in terms of the consequences of this, it's still technically illegal, as you pointed out, to say that you support Palestine action, right? Until at least February the 20th, when they have what's called a consequential hearing, which, as the name suggests, sorts out the consequences of the ruling that's just taken place, which will be Shabana Mahmood, although she won't attend herself, I don't think, but her representatives from the Home Office will argue why they want to take forward an appeal, a disgusting appeal, a morally reprehensible appeal, but an appeal they are allowed at least to do legally speaking. And the judge will decide whether A, they will allow that to go through, and B, whether there will be a stay. Which means that there will be the ban will remain in place during the entirety of that appeal, or whether it will be struck down and they'll have to pass either an emergency piece of legislation or just basically drop the appeal, which may very well be how it works out in the end. But either way, the entirety of this is Zionism. Okay, Shabana Mahmood, the current prime minister, at least at time of recording, and who knows what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after, who appointed, of course, yum friend of Jeffrey Epstein and all the rest of it, who himself was a former head of public prosecutions and a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, who seems to not understand the basics of human rights, apparently, and of course has been engaged in a genocide, which is, ditto. They're all in hock to the state of Israel for any number of different reasons, whether it be ideological, whether it be compromat, whatever the hell it is, it doesn't really matter. This is being done for the state of Israel and nothing else. Again, it's meant to have a chilling effect. Even if it gets overturned, it's partly served its purpose. It's made people question whether they want to come out publicly and support the Palestinian cause, because they don't want to end up in jail for 14 years. And that's the point. When the ruling talks about the infringement on people's freedom of speech, that's the sort of thing they're referring to. This is obviously had the concrete effect of, and I believe the intention of, trying to chill people's free speech in regards to Israel and Palestine and the current genocide that's going on there. And unfortunately, it has in that degree worked, because I think people have been reticent to come out supporting them publicly. But thankfully, due to the work of some fantastic lawyers who've worked on their behalf at the High Court, and of course the hunger strikers and people like this, have kept this issue going. They've kept this issue live, and they're beginning to get victories, both in terms of the hunger strikers themselves and the Palestine Action Group now potentially being certified as a terrorist organization. And this is a massive win. This is just an unadulterated win at this stage. It doesn't necessarily change anything, at least until February the 20th, but it's an absolute W, and we should celebrate it as such.
Yeah, when you said you were going to disagree with Owen Jones, I knew exactly what part you're going to talk about, because obviously I disagree, which is that these people won't face justice. I don't think Owen agrees with himself there. It's so cathartic to tell a politician you're going to jail. Like, I do that a lot. I'm like, when I tweet at politicians who've been back in a genocide, I'm like, one day you're going to be behind bars. In my head, I'm like, no, not, but it is cathartic.
Absolutely. Look, in an ideal world, they all should be
in an
behind
ideal
bars.
world, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, every member of the British establishment would be behind bars at The Hague, awaiting trial for their complicity in genocide, let alone in any number of other crimes as well, of course.
Well, the seat with Tony Blair's name on it, it's just gathering dust. That fucker should be in The Hague.
Yeah, him, George Bush, a lot of them, yeah.
Talk to me about the political fallout of this. It's a huge win. I think it's a win for freedom of speech as well. We have had, it feels like every week is the worst week of the Labour Party's life in government, and it's like we just need to get over this blip, but that something worse happens. What's the political fallout from this? How do you think the majority of people are going to respond to, I would say, a huge government defeat?
In the short term, I don't think it necessarily changes anything because, again, they can just forestall it to the consequential hearing on the 20th, right? And that's what this Labour Party loves to do. They just say, well, I won't be revealing what's in the autumn statement. You'll have to wait until then. Which just means you've just got a cliff edge at that point rather than building up to whatever. Anyway, but the point is, I don't think anything will change in the immediate term. The government are still weak as hell and in absolute chaos and stabbing each other in the back and briefing and counter briefing, but not about this topic yet. Because ultimately, if it gets overturned, there will be some serious questions to answer. I think there will undoubtedly be an urgent question debate in Parliament about this, because if it gets ruled that it was never legal, even though it was voted for by the majority of parliamentarians, those parliamentarians will want to know why the information the government gave them was itself unlawful. You gave the highest court in the land, or at least the highest non-judicial court in the land, Parliament itself, and the elected representative chamber of that Parliament, information that was unlawful, which means you are at the very least incompetent or malign actors trying to act in illegal ways to protect X group of people or X movement or X forces. And so I think parliamentarians will want answers to some very probing questions as to how this state of affairs came to be, which puts more pressure on Keir Starmer and exposes far more, of course, the authoritarianism at the very core of this government, whether it's putting people in jail for 4 years for being on a Zoom call where they were planning to cause public nuisance. They got 4 years for that, for a Zoom call, or whether it's putting people in jail for quite rightly calling for the end of genocide against Palestinians, or whatever it is, whether it's trying to get rid of jury trials, which, by the way, Shabana Mahmood, how fucking dare you speak of democratic institutions or democratic action when you are literally trying to strip people's jury trials away from them? Like it's ridiculous. You're literally allowing the blocking of local council elections for a second year running. So you don't get a jury trial, you don't get elections anymore. But apparently they're the keepers they're the protectors of democracy somehow. It's ridiculous. Like, they are allowed to do to appeal this decision. Of course they are. Everyone who loses is potentially allowed to go forward with an appeal at some point. But the point is, this government always do it, especially when it comes to Israel, because they can't accept that there are limitations on their power. They don't see themselves as servants of people. They see themselves as the masters in this situation. And so the fact that there are people who are not involved in the government who have power over them, i.e. the courts, who can say this is unlawful, they just can't accept that. They have to go with it. This didn't surprise me in the slightest that they instantly came out and said, we're appealing this, even though they can't have taken proper legal scrutiny of the decision and legal advice from the Attorney General, because literally she was out there within a couple of hours of it happening. So there's no way she was properly briefed on this, but it's an instant trigger. This has to be done to allow them to defend Israel. That's it. That's all they were interested in. They know it's unlawful. They knew it was unlawful when they did it, but they don't care because it's about defending Israel and nothing else.